hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid.
All right. Welcome back to The Hybrid, the podcast where former cannabis regulators talk policy, pop culture, and I guess everything in between with the people that are actually living it. I'm Sean Collins, and yes, I used to be one of those Massachusetts regulators making life a bit more complicated for folks. Now I spend my time trying to make sense of this industry with whoever is willing to talk. Operators, other regulators, activists, and the occasional person who just wants to talk about weed. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Eric Gunderson, Maine's former top cannabis regulator, who now consults governments and businesses around those regulators. We've both made that jump from writing the rules to living them, and honestly, we're probably both sleeping a bit better these days. Today, we're going to be diving into one of those stories that captures everything about Massachusetts cannabis, the promise, the reality, and the gap between them that will sometimes swallow good operators whole. Our guest is Carl Giannone. Did I pronounce that right, Carl?
You did.
Perfect. Carl co-founded Trade Roots alongside his far more handsome and skilled partner, Jesse Pitts, which was Massachusetts' first fully vertically integrated social equity operator. Before that, he was managing a Wall Street trading desk, suits, spreadsheets, seven-figure trades before lunch maybe. And then a family medical experience changed everything. He walked away from finance to chase cannabis. If you're on LinkedIn, you've probably seen Carl's posts. He's not shy, sometimes not shy with me. He's become famous for his brutal honesty about an industry that doesn't usually talk about losses and sometimes only talks about wins. The man literally wrote, "I failed, let's talk about it," after Trade Roots closed early this year. There's no spin, no excuses, no bullshit, just truth served with a side maybe of some dark humor. Somehow the internet decided that he has a prosthetic leg as well, so we're going to talk about that. He says he doesn't, time will tell. What he did have, though, was Trade Roots, complete with a window into their grow room so customers could see exactly where their cannabis came from. Radical transparency in an industry that spent decades in the shadows. Now, as Carl's doing the podcast circuit, we're certainly happy to have him here. We're going to go somewhere different today, though. We're not here for the highlight reel or the standard entrepreneur story. We want to talk about maybe what broke, why doing everything right still wasn't enough. And if Carl ran the Cannabis Control Commission for a day, would he be able to fix it? We'll trace the whole journey, Wall Street to Wareham, grand opening to closing, the regulations that helped, the ones that hurt, the ones that made him wonder if we were actively trying to tank the industry. We're also going to talk dispensaries follow hundreds of pages of regulations, while gas stations are able to sell unregulated products. Plus, the testing lab wars where mold contamination is apparently way more widespread than anyone's admitting. And because this is Massachusetts, we've got a few ballot questions that might be coming up that could maybe blow up the whole industry. We'll mix in some trivia, keep things light where we can, though honestly, after navigating Massachusetts' regulations, our trivia might feel like a vacation. Look, when I was writing the rules, I thought we were building something good, sustainable, equitable. But intentions don't pay rent. They don't make payroll. And they sure as hell don't help when you're competing against illicit markets, hemp loopholes, and tax rates that would make a loan shark blush. Today, Carl's going to help us understand what those good intentions actually cost the people trying to build something real. This isn't about regulator bashing. I won't stand for it. Well, unless I'm doing it. It's about understanding, learning, and maybe finding a path forward that doesn't require operators to choose between compliance and survival. So grab your favorite Massachusetts-grown flower, probably from Trade Roots, and settle in. We're about to get real about social equity's broken promises and what it actually takes to survive in the most regulated industry in America's most regulated state. So with that, I guess we'll get started. Eric, it's always good to see you. Thank you for giving me some space to have Carl on. And I think as a former regulator myself, and you obviously fill in the same shoes, I think it's good that we're going to spend some time talking to Carl and get his perspective, and I think have a conversation, because I don't see many of these. Regulator to operator, let's hit record, let's talk about it. And I do think that our audience will hopefully benefit from seeing that two people can talk and have a conversation, and you can wear your hat, I can wear mine. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, we've had some really good guests on this podcast, but this one I'm particularly excited to have. I mean, one from the dynamic of like two former regulators and a former licensee, to have that open, honest dialogue and debate, because sometimes it can certainly turn sour, especially when you're still in that seat, in the moment, in front of the legislature, in a working group. So to have some honest feedback, dialogue, certainly, hopefully get something from this conversation that I can take back to my state clients as well. Because as you mentioned, still actually writing some of those rules, just not for my home state. But even more excited for the fact that he's a former, or Carl, you're a former Massachusetts licensee, so I can hear the real story. And if there is some shit talking on Sean, I'm definitely here for it. I'll stand for it. I'll probably support you in it. But no, honestly, like, hear the feedback to, like, Sean, I know and love you, but to talk to Carl and get his perspective.
Sean, I know and love you. There's the clip.
To get his perspective and hear more what their perception of you. I'm just excited for the conversation. So, Sean, always nice seeing you, sir. Carl, thank you for making the time to join us today and have this conversation. I'm excited for it. But also, too, I think it would be important for me, because I don't know you as well as Sean does, and certainly our listeners. I think just a little bit of your background. Sean gave kind of bits and pieces, but if you want to give us some of that before we launch into the questions here, that would be great.
Thank you,
Carl.
both Sean and Eric. Thanks for having me on.
Of course.
So, my name's Carl Giannone. Up until 2016, and I say this somewhat ashamedly and often, I thought that the cannabis business was for criminals and children. And if we take a look at, we are the first social equity vertical. That makes Jesse, well, that makes me whatever. And
you all play your roles. Yeah, fair enough.
And so, like 2013, when were like the first Canadian RTOs? Like they were like maybe 2013. I mean, they were all just garbage companies. So I was on the buy side. So, take a look at some of that stuff, all sheets. And then, I got an opportunity in 2016 to invest in a grow out in Oregon. And, I sent the deck off to a couple of friends who do like diligence for P and VC and that kind of stuff. And they wrote me back. It was, I sent it on a Thursday, and then Friday, like right before the close, I get an email back. What's the minimum investment? To which I respond, crap, there goes my weekend. Right.
Yeah.
Now I got to do homework. So, put together an investor group, went out there about a year later, realized the farm was being run awfully, didn't want to go bigger, wanted to go smaller. At that time, in that process, met Jesse. He had taken some extraction courses out in Colorado. Actually, turns out his traditional market partner, who I went to school with, lived across the street from my better half's growing up. So we all grew up in a very small town, all near each other. And so originally, Trade Routes had 5 partners, wound up being 2. But so when the plane landed, for me, this was a vacation, right? Like a working vacation. We were out there. Yeah. Jesse asked me, he's like, why don't we bring this mountain to Wareham? And, I look at him, I'm like, what the fuck is a Wareham? Like, I live in Manhattan. I have an office in New York and Miami, right? Like, this is not, well, now I live in Wareham, but, so plane lands,
quaint.
We taught my mother.
It's very quaint.
It is. I like it here. I was also never a city guy. So like, I lived there for 17 years, but I go back now. It's wonderful to visit. It's great to visit, but I like crickets and, I didn't know what a cranberry bog is, and I look out one every morning, and it's nice. I'm lucky. But so thought, and I thought medical cannabis was, if I'm sick, I'd rather be high and sick than not high and sick. And if I was really sick, like cancer, I'd probably want to be really high, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, plane lands, find out my mom is sick and metastasized everywhere. And they had her on, I think they had her on like 80 mgs of oxy with it. And she was like 106 pounds. I fortunately grew up before the opiate thing, so that fortunately has not touched me in the ways that I'm really blessed there. But all of a sudden, like, she was like, I'm now dating myself with my age, but like the movie Train Spotting, like she was nodding out, watching NASCAR. And if you ever met my tiny little mother, she was not a NASCAR fan. I'm not knocking NASCAR in any way. That was just not her. And so we decided as a family to put her on cannabis, make the switch. And, it didn't save her, but we got her back for 6 months. And during that time, I was writing the business plan for I left New York and was with her, and I got really fortunate there. And so, but I got to talk to, you're writing a business plan at 2:00 in the morning at a hospital, doctors, nurses start to talk. And it was like, okay, so, and so originally, guys, I was supposed to, my role was to raise $2.2 million. I get to go back to my life. I'd have 5% of the company, and that would be it. Wound up, plans changed and got involved in operations and got to help Jesse stand up Trade Routes.
So your exposure ultimately to cannabis was, and I think it's an interesting, I think a lot of people might come to it like this, where it's, you knew what you assumed or sort of what you observed. And then unfortunately, I'm sorry for your mother's experience, but I'm grateful you had that time with her to see the potential positive benefits of medical cannabis as a therapeutic value, right? Like, I think for a lot of people, the spectrum is like, it's a gateway drug, it's a miracle drug. And I think somewhere in between is reality where, like you said, if I'm sick and cannabis can help me feel either less sick or I can be sick while high, at least it's a less burdensome or less adverse experience potentially. But I think what changed from what you assumed about cannabis to what you observed actually in the experience of your mother, I guess, managing through a therapeutic way her cancer? Is it something that, was there like not so much an epiphany, but like, was there something that thought, okay, there's something here?
So yes and yes. So the opiates, she was not in pain. She also wasn't present. And then
Sure.
so I haven't had a TV since it was cathode ray tubes. And so I miss like the last time I watched TV was in the 90s. Like,
All right, we'll get to that later.
So,
yeah, let's put a pin in that. We'll come back to that.
So but when mom was sick, we'd watch a lot of TV. And so like the quick shot camera angle, like my memory is like, what is it? The 3 angle from like Seinfeld, but like this new zoom in and like Modern Family was a show and it was constant changing. But anyway, when realizing, so we would play, when she was in the hospital, we played a game. If there's a lot of time we'd watch, I would stay nights. My sister would do days. And so, in the evenings it was news and that kind of stuff. And so I think I figured out like 7 out of 10 commercials were pharma. This is all pre-COVID. This is 2017, pre-COVID. And we played a drinking game. She hated, what is that? There's like a citrus thing they give you so you don't get bed sores when you're in the hospital. She hated it. And it tasted like Tang. And so we had a drinking game that I would make her take a shot of this stuff every time there was a drug that she was on. That was on, or class of drugs. It didn't have to be, so if she wasn't on the brand name, it would, but when like the same company that made the opiate made the anti-constipation drug it's like,
yeah.
So yes, cannabis, big different because she was present. She got an app. I mean, she gained 20 pounds into her death of metastatic lung cancer. So, I mean, after losing, but what I did notice was, so they wouldn't let you, so she was on the Connecticut caregiver program. But they wouldn't let you bring cannabis into the hospital.
Right.
And so the doctor said, I forget whatever the name of the prescription, Sativ something, Marinol, one of them. And they said, well, you could give her, she could take this instead. And so she was doing the capsules of, I think it was like a 5 milligram, back then it was, I think just decarboxylated, like crude into a capsule. If I now look at it through my eyes now, and then they gave her the equivalent of the prescription drug, and she was like jittery and sort of weird and said she was uncomfortable. And like, it didn't strike me until like a few days later. It was like, all right, why don't we hold off on this? And then she was fine, but then other stuff. And it was like, oh, okay. So this, entourage effect. Let me let me take a note on this, right? So what was interesting was that the doctors, and this was Fairfield County, Connecticut, great hospital, great doctors, even the young oncologists said there is no medical value other than maybe it'll make you mentally feel better for cannabis, period. Whereas as they're saying it, the nurses behind them would be shaking their heads like, talk to me in the hallway.
Yeah.
And then certainly, being here, I mean, one of the amazing things about what I got to experience helping build Trade Routes was I got to live all across that supply chain. So
Right.
going out and speaking to customers, realizing that this, at least in 2025, is not a gateway drug any more than sugar, caffeine, anything that you take that'll change your, right? So any of those things, maybe video games could probably be put in there with endorphins and all that, right? But, but the number of people, especially here by the Cape, that this was their off-ramp from opiates. The same story over and little different. We got to do, Sean, guys, this was fun. So we did a thing with the Council on Aging. This was a couple of years ago. And so we had to had to get the town to approve it and the whole thing. And like probably 80 to 85 seniors came out and asking questions and all of it. And some turned into, they loved Janine's beach grass topicals. That was a big favorite. What I have found though in my, maybe I'm squirreling a little bit here, but I have found in my personal life. So I am all of my friends growing up's parents drug dealer, right? So, including the ones that busted me back in high school for cannabis, right?
Small world, yeah.
So I would bring, so we had one of my dear friends, his parents moved to Plymouth. And so I bought a gift basket. And so topicals, the CBD stuff, a CBD bath bomb, I think some one of the Healing Rose things, and then one thing of sleep gummies, figuring maybe 2 weeks later, I get a call. I'm like, oh, you need more topical? Like, oh, we haven't tried that, but those gummies, we haven't slept well. I mean, I'm so, but it's, I mean, this is, guys, and I don't know if you're younger than I am, but like, could you have imagined when, like, I think about, like, I'm sitting in undergrad, I'm sitting on the couch, Dazed and Confused is on TV, ripping bong, out of an acrylic bong, probably Mexican brick. And if one of you told me, dude, in 30 years, this will be legal and, we'll be making money, well, maybe not making money, but we'll be in business doing it, like, I mean, could you guys?
That was me in law school. I'm thinking to myself, like, what did you go to law school for? I know what I didn't go for, and it was cannabis, and it was cannabis regulations. And I remember my oldest brother is a police officer. My middle brother runs a series of airports, and I was the Northeast's biggest drug dealer for a time. And it was like the running joke in my family was like, and your father would be so proud of you. And it's just, but I agree with you as far as like the life events and sort of as the world turns and how we end up in places. But it's interesting that you mentioned the sort of the demographic of consumers that and patients that as they get introduced to cannabis, and you saw it, especially Eric, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Massachusetts. We used to actually own Maine, and then we sort of scrapped it for a little bit. But Wareham is right on the sort of the edge of the Cape, and so it's as you head to the Cape. It certainly for a long time was the stop because Cape Cod for how long, Carl, was let's call it dry for cannabis purposes. So that area of Wareham, and also Wareham, and you would know better than we would, but seemed to be open-minded to cannabis. So a lot of locations, a lot of producers, and it ended up being sort of a gateway to Cape Cod's cannabis access. But
well,
obviously,
Verilife was first, right, or one of the first.
So I mean, was out. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, same sort of region, and then. Coast is based out of Wareham, Bay State Extracts. Like there's just a sort of an ecosystem.
Topicals, coastal cultivars. Yeah, there's a bunch.
And I think the takeaway for me is one, Wareham obviously strategically embraced cannabis and realized there might be something here. But that ecosystem I think is helpful too, of even just like-minded entrepreneurs. But from a retail standpoint, attracting that Cape Cod traffic off or people going to the Cape, sort of a detour on the way, that the demographic of consumers and folks that would sort of come into the shop. And we should note too, and I want to talk more about it. We can see in your background, sort of and it just makes sense to me. I remember when I visited your facility, we had a long conversation about how it didn't make sense to some people at the commission at first. One of the let's call it innovative, that Carl and Jesse did was they built the window into their grow room. So if you were in the retail store shopping, you could see the flower being grown, and wasn't like a gimmick. It was the actual grow room. It's like going to a brewery and seeing the equipment. It's basically participating in the experience. Regulatory wise, few question marks, and we should maybe unpack that.
I was going to jump in and say, how many conversations did you have in the office about those windows in the retail after you saw them or learned about them? I can just imagine. Like, I know that exercise being like, oh, hold on. Oh, wait a minute. What do we have here? Is this...
Carl, why don't you set a table for us and then I'll share my version? Because this is exactly the reason why I think this conversation, this exact dynamic, like I've been looking, Eric, to your point, I've been looking forward to this conversation. One is Carl and Jesse, just to be clear, are two of my favorite people in the entire cannabis industry, Massachusetts included, but even far beyond that. They are genuine people that they're from a just down to earth, common sense, but also whip smart. I think Carl and his background in finance, Jesse is essentially a magician when it comes to cannabis flower, extracts, etc. What a also a bit of an odd couple. And then obviously Carl's got the prosthetic leg, which makes it even more unique. But I think one of the things I've been looking forward to is Carl brings a humility to his experience that I think is refreshing, but also it's just incredibly authentic. And every conversation I've had with Carl in my entire career, which they haven't been a ton, but enough, has been the same. And it's going to be the same today. I'm sure of it. Just there's no bullshit. There's no flies. It is what it is. But I think, Carl, let's start there with the window, because I think obviously Eric wants to satisfy his own curiosity. But what was your experience like when you first off imagined up what an innovative idea? Let's let people see the product when it's being made. But obviously that was met with some regulatory resistance too, wasn't it?
So there were 7 people at Trade Routes who, including myself, who would swear on a stack of Bibles that window was their idea. So probably wasn't mine, so sort of looking at the blueprints, right? There's retail. Well, there's our second flower room. And so sort of walked through with the architects. Okay, so those the windows that you're seeing behind me are actually 95% tinted out. So like that, I mean, the room is just so incredibly bright. And so we spoke with legal, and they're like, this seems to be within the regs. And so it's like, okay, well, let's do it. I mean, worst case, we put drywall there, right? I mean, and we'll figure it out. And so rule of thumb, Sean, as I'm sure you're aware, operators are told, and I was given the wisdom from I forget who was already operational that told me and said, when and we didn't hire any consultants to help. But
well, there's your first mistake.
Well, we didn't.
You're talking to two of us.
It would have, and that's actually when I go through things that I would have done. That would have been one of them. So we opened cultivation and manufacturing first, and our investigator Collins, wonderful, and it's not. But so rule of thumb is if you're not important to the investigation, you don't be around when everybody's walking through. So I was not going to be able to add anything except, a couple off-color jokes. So they're like, Carl, stay in the conference room. So it was like me and everybody else. And so I'm just watching everybody on the cameras, right? And so they're going through the lab. So it's the 2 department heads, Jesse, our general counsel, and I think maybe Tony Gallo from our insurance, from our the security guy. We had someone from the security, people, just in case a camera needed to pop up somewhere or something, right? And so they're going through the lab. I'm getting a little nervous because you've seen the lab, Sean. There's a lot going on, and nope, all good. And okay, so then now they're coming in from the backside into the flower room. So there's effectively they're coming in through the door, and so the window would be on the other side of the tables. And so it's Colin and his team. There's been, I think, 4 of them, and then maybe 3 of them. And then, no, this is COVID. Remember, everybody, masks, the whole thing. And Ilya, our GC, Jesse, and our cultivation director. And I watched Colin take a Superman pose. No, I can't hear anything. I could just see it. Point at the window and start shaking his head. I then watch Ilya, our general counsel, he starts casting a spell or something, because he's going like this. Don't know exactly what's going on. But
and you're just like, shit.
I'm just like, this is the coolest thing. I mean, like, come on, guys. Like,
what's our drywall budget?
Yeah, exactly. Right. You know, and so I guess by the time they walked back, they broke off. They sit alone and talk, I guess, all the people. And then he said he's going to double check with the regs. But so the concern was, and I guess per regs, this is a concern, that there would be a child walking around the industrial park, as children are known to do, and would then walk into this store that doesn't say cannabis anywhere on the outside, but walk in and then stick their head into the reception, look through the one-way glass, see a pot plant, and get hooked on heroin or something. And that was the concern. So what we had to do was have a buzzer lock on the outside door, and we got rid of the two-way glass to prevent the child from doing the thing. And
now, where you are in the industrial park, it's located next to a daycare and a playground as well, or?
It's actually a daycare playground together.
Okay.
It's both. It's just kids play, and yeah.
So that's the concern ultimately. Yeah. I mean,
well,
I'll be clear about this. I think it's a great idea. And I think if it ever came, I don't recall a specific conversation about it outside of my reaction would have been the very honest, I think it's a cool idea. Why do we care? Outside of, and I think the precaution of like having like whatever step needs to be taken to ensure it is not accessible to kids. But at that point, you are into a retail store. Someone is presented at your facility, been ID checked, confirmed as 21, then through the man trap into your facility, and they then get to see the product being grown. For me, I think the attractiveness of that is consumer education. And also it probably generates conversation about if someone's buying your house flower, they're literally watching it get produced. And it's the brand benefit of that from that is we're putting it on full display. We've got nothing to hide. I mean, because obviously if someone's walking through that grow room with a backpack sprayer, I'm probably not going to buy your flower. I'm going to, and we should definitely talk about remediation because Carl's not been shy about that either. But my point being, for me, I think that's where cannabis needs to be further normalized ultimately. And the stigma removed of what are we afraid of? It's watching a plant grow. My goodness.
It's funny.
Goodness.
It's funny you say that, Sean. I mean, it sounds like there might be even more similarities between our styles too. Because I would be, all right, if I can't recall a rule, a regulation, a law off the top of my head that would prohibit it, then I would be like, yeah, that's cool too. And a lot of times that would get me in trouble. Like Carl, I was a really bad regulator, but luckily my number 2, which was much more
that too, actually, for sure.
I know I'm setting myself up for these, but it's true. Like I was fantastic at my job. At least I would like to think so, but I was a bad regulator in the sense it's just like, yeah, that seems totally fine. But my number 2 was much more conservative, and he would be the one. And I thank my lucky stars that I have him would call attention to it. And that's why I said, how many conversations did you have? Because if we were faced with this, I know we would have a robust conversation, and I would be advocating, unless it was black and white in writing, I'd be like, it's totally fine and cool. And my number 2 would be, yeah, but what happens if the kid from 6 blocks away walks by and pops his head in, and we'd have a conversation around it. But on the other end too, like, especially early on, and Sean, I'd be interested to hear if you had kind of similar scenarios, specifically around COVID. We launched during COVID, so we had a lot of exceptions in variances in our rule to allow us to actually launch the market during COVID and can function. And we had this one thing. Sales were required to go through brick and mortar point of purchase. Like there were no drive-through windows, there was
Yeah.
no delivery, there was no curbside. So we put out a variance where we allowed this curbside. COVID. Yep, great. Everybody loved it. Of course, we had this one gentleman in Northern Maine who decided to install a drive-through window. And I was like, we that like from a public health and safety perspective in COVID, like I totally get it. It totally makes sense, but that's not what we said you could do. And our main concern, even though it seemed like it was a decent approach to address the issue, you're also faced with the like, give an inch, they're going to take a mile. If we allow this, what is going to be next? Are they going to have cars driving through the facility? Like I don't know. So I'm with you on the window, Sean, but also from the regulatory, just from the being in the hot seat and trying to draw that line is like, what do we allow? What do we not? What is actually a threat to public health and safety? Obviously this window is not. It's just, yeah, I'm definitely in the same
It's
lane as you as far as a regulator, but
it's an
certainly
interesting dynamic. I think because you talked like, and I'm sure Carl, you had an experience during COVID as well, as far as like what is the curbside allowance, how far is that line, and
Mhm.
also keeping in mind that curbside in Boston is different than curbside in Wareham, which is different than curbside in Chicopee, and I think our experience was if the community is okay with it and the facility can manage it as far as logistics, then it should be permissible. But the drive-through piece is one that's still sort of um, it's still a live question or live policy volleyball right now, at least in Massachusetts. And my perspective on was a few. One is there's no curbside or drive-through alcohol. It's not expressly prohibited by statute. Uh, but as far as how do you demonstrate compliance with our existing regulations around the sales floor, cameras, the transaction being on camera, um, one issue that comes up constantly or came up constantly was who's in the vehicle. If there's children in the vehicle, now there's children technically on the sales floor. So all these things sort of bubbled up, and I kept saying to our staff and also to commissioners, I don't make policy. It's not my responsibility as the executive director of the agency to make your policy. You as commissioners get to within the confines of the statute, but the regulations need to either explicitly allow it or prohibit it. And I don't want to be the one that sticks my neck out so far to say, yes, this is allowed. It was a tolerance during COVID. Some folks did build a drive-through window, but then other folks went ahead and bought, like full-fledged car washes with bays and like garage doors.
that's what I mean. Like literally a car driving through the facility.
And I think demonstrating compliance, it's sort of one of those like, if it's a jump ball, my theory was like, if it's a jump ball, that's a commission decision, that's a policy choice to make, not so much because on the back end of that, if I get to make every jump ball call or if I get to stretch policy so far, I don't know who my successor is going to be someday. The industry needs some predictability as to what rules they have to actually comport to. And so that became, I think, a sort of a sticky issue for a while. But I did typically land on the side of what's good for the industry, ultimately, what makes sense. Like if this is just not so much like if our rule is dumb, but like if this is common sense or like, let's use the window again as the example, like that sounds like a really interesting idea. It's a really novel concept. It's novel in cannabis, but I think, Carl, to your point, like 7 people probably can take credit for that because it just makes sense to do. And as you're building it out and thinking like, hey, we have a grow room right here. Maybe we should let people see inside of it. Wow. Again, my goodness. Like I just think that some of those things if they came across my desk, that was typically my gut reaction is, do I care? Is this something that I'm going to get worried about? What I will tell you is that as a regulator, we are constantly balancing the sort of the prohibitionist, the sky is falling with you're not letting us run fast enough. And I think that tension is good and it's healthy. But when you're the one that's sort of managing that tension and sort of pulling it and pushing it in certain directions, it can be it's not a pleasant place to be. It's a tough job. But again, we weren't operators either. We weren't putting our livelihoods on the line and our reputations on the line. And So just different shoes, I suppose.
Yeah, and I will say, for all these different scenarios and these gray areas, and as you say, Sean, calling balls and strikes,
Yeah.
but there was a difference where I didn't have a board of commission to kind of get behind or
What's
deflect the
that
conversation.
like?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, but I was the ultimate decision making, so that put a lot more pressure on some of the decisions that came out of the office. There was like
So it is your fault. Yeah.
I don't know what is exactly my fault. I think we have a lovely adult use program up here in Maine. But
Cute. Yeah.
So Carl, let's go back to you because I want to hear more about this. So we have we've got the window, which I think is cool. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more operators that have already stolen it from you in Massachusetts, Maine, and other markets in the area. But when
don't
you're
think there are,
getting
actually.
started, no, well,
Not yet.
all right, keep your head on a
There's
swivel.
one.
Copyright
There's one
trademark.
that has cameras with a OLED screen behind retail. Maybe I think there's two that have that, but
So fully vertically integrated cultivation, manufacturing, retail, starting from scratch, getting it off the ground, going through the process, dealing with Sean and his team at the CCC. What was the hardest part to navigate where you literally wanted to pull your hair out and be like, this is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever had to deal with. This process makes zero sense. Why are we doing this?
Do you want me to sign off for this portion?
I would love to be able to pull my hair out, Eric. That would be
Yeah,
that would
I
be
was-
a high
What a
a high
cheap
quality
shot.
I
problem.
picked up on that before I said it, but I said it anyway.
What a cheap shot.
That would be a real high quality problem, man. I mean, for us, okay, so the hardest part was raising money, obviously, separate from the regs. But as part of that, we never wanted to raise money before we needed to because of valuation, right? So the valuation that we'd get when we had a host community agreement was definitely different than a provisional license, so having the money, and also there were a handful of consultants back then, but it was still, it was former DPH, it was still new, it was, and so, our investors, we didn't hire any consultants. And so it was really me and Jesse and asking around and all of it. And we didn't apply as social equity applicants because originally, Sean, if you remember, it was a 50% ownership requirement. And we just knew Jesse would not have 50% fully diluted. So also didn't do what a lot of other companies did, which was create structures where at the time of the application, the social equity person is whatever, and then there's planned dilution beyond that. Didn't do that. So we applied as general applicants. So I believe our cultivation application was like number 64. We were like early in. And I remember we got, I think, 4 RFIs on that one. And one of them, was around, we had the diversity plan and the positive impact plan. And I come from an eat what you kill, buy side Wall Street background. Jesse worked in construction. So all of a sudden we have this diversity plan. And so and this is, before AI. So I'm researching. And so, I think UCLA had a diversity plan. So I'm like, well, that looks good. Let me just copy this. And the response we get back was effectively, you guys don't know the difference between equity and equality. Figure it out. Like it was in more words than that, but just trying to figure out like, okay, what words do you want there? And I think finally we reached out to our attorneys and they're like, yes, just use these words. And they're the appropriate words, but just figuring, and what we did see, Sean, that was very different was, so we had a provisional delivery license.
Mhm.
And the difference in the process there versus when you're because general applicant, the constant answer is, we can't tell you, talk to your attorneys. We can't tell you, that's a business. Do you just train everyone, Sean, to say that's a business decision? We can't, that's like, it's just the same phrase.
We can't give you legal advice. We can't give you legal advice.
Can't give you legal advice, but if you're wrong, there are going to be legal consequences.
Yeah, amen.
Administered by us.
I got good at that too, Sean. Don't worry about it.
I'm feeling attacked right now.
Sean, were you the one that just would send things back from an email address with no signature? It was just the general.
One of my biggest pet peeves. On the back end, think about the logistics on the back end of that. let's say you called me and said, I got this email from the licensing at or, inspections at, and I would go, okay, let me go talk to whoever sent it. I don't know who sent it. It came from generic inbox from generic person. And like you said, this was like pre-AI. So like a human had to write this. And I'm thinking, which one of you wrote this? And it was like, they did. And so finally I was like, I need people to start putting a signature on these emails for our own traceability purposes, but also our own sort of teachability purposes of,
Yeah.
because if we're giving out different answers, we have an obligation internally to figure out, okay, the two of you need to talk, or does that need to get elevated as a decision point of if these are in conflict, someone needs to at least, to Eric's point, like the balls and strikes, someone needs to call it. Someone needs to say, like, this one's on the line, I'm going to call it a strike. This one's on the line, I'm going to call it a ball. But yeah, the generic email outbox was always that was like a pet peeve of mine. I had a lot of pet peeves at the time, and I'm sure you could appreciate too, like I think you commented that we're building the fire truck and you build the airplane, like, but we still gotta build it. We gotta land it or we gotta get to the fire. But building it as we were, those were some growing pains of ours. Was, keep in mind, the first application we reviewed as an agency was the first application any agency in Massachusetts reviewed for adult use marijuana. And I think my takeaway there is we better go through an exercise, start a process, write that process down. Now we're developing organically an SOP. But one, be patient with us. I'm sure if you were application 64, we didn't get to that one right away, is my guess.
So it was funny. We put them in, I think, in the fall. It was bumping up against, it was beyond the statutory 100 and whatever days. And I just remember reaching out to our attorney, and he's like, what are you going to do? It's like, you're right. You're right. Like, what are we going to, like, okay, you guys have this in statute. Yeah, okay, we'll keep waiting. But it was actually funny, Sean. So I was with my ex, but it was over Christmas, over that time period, I guess. And yeah, I guess we put it in the late summer, I guess early fall, and they got approved in January. And we're on a tiny plane coming.
That's government efficiency at its best.
Get your house in order, Sean. Get
And we're on this like tiny puddle jumper going from Richmond. And it's because 11:30 was when you guys, or whatever the time was, would post the agenda. And I'm just sitting there refreshing. And like, we're in the South, there's a tiny little plane, and all of a sudden LDE Holdings is on the schedule, and I'm jumping up and down in my seat, and everyone's like, yeah, that was
we're going down.
yeah, right before we took off.
And those are things, it's like, you can only imagine our relief to get that ball rolling of applications, getting a pace under us. And also keep in mind too, I'm sure you experienced this on the operator side, at some point we put our process through a sort of a stress test and said, where can we find efficiencies in our review that those efficiencies do not sacrifice the quality of our review or the substance of our review, where we're not cutting corners, we're not skipping an evaluation or something. And we realized we sort of got the SOP in place and said, all right, now let's test it. And once we did, it was like, all right, the machine is working as efficiently as we can without sacrificing quality. The only way, therefore, to increase throughput is to hire more people and then train them on that process. Now, of course, you can imagine, once you hire 2, 3, 4 more people, you then got to train those people. And so for a while, that was true on the investigator side, is we get this criticism like, why are you sending 4 or 5 people to a single investigation? It's like, well, 3 of them are training.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turned into like, we roll pretty deep at the Cannabis Control Commission. The same is true on the licensing side. But as you can imagine, we're not training robots, we're training human beings. And also the human beings have an eye for specific things that maybe someone else doesn't. So if someone has a background and expertise in agriculture, I want to make sure that they're going into cultivation facilities. If someone has a specialty in building inspections, I want to make sure that they're going on provisional inspections. And just to make sure that we're also cross-training each other. And all that stuff is really good, healthy hygiene, but it also is a time suck. It's, it's not efficient to send 5, 6 people on a single investigation, but to send one person means we got to send someone else out next, and they may not see the same thing. We're also building out a case management system to make sure that we actually take our notes and put them into a single system where the next person that shows up at Trade Routes has the last inspection in place and the notes from it to say, I should probably follow up on that thing that someone talked to Jesse about. And if Jesse then says, well, you were here last time and you looked at that, we can then actually verify that that's the case. And again, all those things take time, they take money. But those are luxuries that we didn't necessarily have early on, both time and money. And, I'll certainly stand by our rollout as being proud of it, but I think I'm also pretty confident that I'm my own worst critic as well. So, I could probably point out some of the lowlights of my experience too. But I don't know I don't think there's a question as much in there, but I'm bracing for an Eric snark comment.
I was going to ask if you are going to clip or make reels out of some of those lowlights of yours, which I'm sure there would be plenty to fill in.
Why would I do that?
Exactly. And so, Carl, I got another specific question for you about your experience with the CCC, and if you want to pull Sean into this on the individual level, be happy to listen.
Are we having a main operator on at some point?
Yeah, we absolutely should.
All right.
I got a few that would make for a wild podcast.
Can you get the guy who has the dispensary in the gas station?
Oh, yeah. Those guys are right down the road in Portland.
Was that Atlantic Farms? Is that?
Yeah, Atlantic Farms. Know those guys well.
Such a cool concept.
Yeah. What was I going to say? So
nothing.
Application number 64, I'm guessing you were fairly early on-ish. You were around for quite a while. And I always took it, part of my job is to make sure that constantly improving the cannabis program on a number of different fronts. Are we doing the best job possible to protect public health and safety? Are we doing the best job possible to create a competitive environment? Understanding at the end of the day, the economics really don't work in these siloed markets. Like, are we doing everything we can? Are we revising the rule to make sure that, like, if there's a rule in there, is there a reason it's in there? Is it working? Is it necessary? Can we take it out? Like, this continued push forward of progress to make sure that on all fronts we're improving our program. What changes from like day one you opened your doors, you had some of the challenges that you had covered. Did you see an evolution in the market? Did things get better for you? Did things get worse for you? Did they stay the same from an operator perspective as far as the evolution of the program in Massachusetts? Were there positive strides forward there? Or were there things that you think could have went further?
Are you thinking about the market or shifts in regulation and enforcement of regulation?
Yeah, I'm thinking about from the regulatory perspective, from the job that the CCC was doing, both from a policy perspective, so I guess more commission level, but also Sean in the agency level.
So one of the things, I did reach out to some friends before going on this podcast, and my experience is my experience, and I'd also maybe be a little more reticent to talk about my specific experience as things are, still where they are. But one of the things that is a common, and so I'm a member of the CBA, David O'Brien sort of is a cannabis business association.
Okay.
Mostly smaller operators, a lot of great folks. But one of the things that we hear, and every meeting it's hosted by a different operator, and then there's a commissioner or two. Sean was invited. That was actually the first time I met Sean, was at one of these. But one of the things you hear over and over and over again is inspectors enforcing the same regulations differently. And I heard a story yesterday that made my mind explode. There's an operator in Massachusetts who got an NOD. This goes back to December of 2023. Got an NOD for advertising because he put the word specials on his website. So he then proceeded to show his investigator every competitor around him that has specials, discounts, percentages off. I mean, all he had was specials, which then had bundles underneath, which in my understanding is compliant. The word specials, I guess perhaps not. But everyone around him was advertising, discounts, specials, all of this stuff. And it resulted in he, went and researched, and his revenues were down $5 million over that year, while his competitors were still advertising all of this stuff. And it took a year for the commission to respond after he pinged, and then finally got a response back, basically stating that, and I'd love, Sean, your take on this, but it's like, when, I mean, this really affects business. You know,
Yeah.
when, I mean, I know I could talk about personally. So we had the packaging with the window, right? And the case we made was it's not show, you know, whatever the reg said to a marijuana product. It wasn't product. It was cannabis. And when our investigators, his concern was, and this was, we got it approved through the portal, but through the final inspection, he's like, well, what if a child walking through again, the same family of children, walking through the industrial park happens to run up to a stranger and goes, what's in that takeout bag? Looks in, sees the dried flower, gets hooked on heroin. So brilliantly, and I'll give Roger Williamson all the credit in the world, he was our COO, in real time, grabs a stapler, staples the bag shut, puts his hand through and goes, new SOP. And it's okay. It's allowed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but fast forward to last year, all of a sudden, Trade Routes gets an NOD for their packaging. Apparently, another company put a window in their packaging, got it approved through the portal, printed up all the packaging, and then got an NOD from their inspector because of the window. And then they said, well, Trade Routes did it, and then we get an NOD. And it's like, how does...
Okay, now I feel like maybe we are jumping on Sean a little bit, but I'm hoping you were gone by this. How does that happen if there's pre-approval for this stuff? The pre-approval is to like sidestep these
It's
issues.
like a hall
and-
pass.
yeah.
Yeah.
we were told that the pre-approval does not matter. We were told, and what
But why have pre-approval?
previous approvals didn't matter. It's the new thing that matters, and that's all that matters. Now, granted, there is the exemption that if it causes undue business harm, and since we got new packaging, we just had a whole bunch of packaging. It was handled well given the absurdity. But
Sure. But the absurdity was also self-inflicted on the commission's part ultimately. And I think that's my frustration is like, these are the stories that I would get secondhand, thirdhand, and not have any insight into as far as like why. And again, it would be like, what are we doing? Why is this the priority of the day, or why is this the thing? And then I think, you know, the sort of comical but practical, like, new SOP is staple a thing shut. And it's like, okay, like, let them exhaust that packaging and say, all right, moving forward, change it.
they
Because
did.
I would go, but that's the thing, it's like, that makes sense
They were
to me
great.
from like all right, let's resolve this and move forward. Because to be clear, both of us have bigger fish to fry. Like we both have much more important, much more pressing. I would, let's call it secret shop. Like I would go out into retail just to, as a customer, and observe and be like, that's like, that's a 10 milligram gummy on the market. I'm an adult use consumer. That's a
No,
problem
it's not,
for me.
Sean. It has a divider.
It's perforated. You can't see the perforation through the sugar on it, but sure, it's perforated. But
They're
that's
delicious if you tried them.
the
peanut
nanos
butter
are
and
great.
jelly's really
The
good.
nanos are great. But that's where I would sort of come back and be like, let's at least poke this one around a little bit and figure out what's going on. Or I would see like a trade name that's on the market, and it's like, that's a clear violation of our rules. Like, let me flag this. Or I would walk in and sort of, I would have an experience and go like, we should maybe put some energy into this experience. Versus the, like, I'll just call it for what it is, like the ball busting that goes on when it comes to some ticky-tack shit that doesn't really add up to a massive public health and safety concern for me. And I would also argue from a devotion of resources standpoint, I would imagine the investigators don't want to be doing that level of work. They want to be going after issues of where's the money going, the hidden ownership issues that are rampant in this space. We haven't talked about labs and testing and all the other actually like issues of consequence that are affecting the quality of product, the quality and the reputation of the marketplace. This might be a decent segue into hemp, but like there's a lot more bigger issues that are really threatening this industry and risking public health and safety. Windows and packaging are not it. And it was never, I'll be clear about this, it was never an enforcement priority of mine. And if I did become aware of it, it was typically through secondhand, third hand of like, what is going on? And my reaction would mostly be, don't know about it. Let me dig into it. And that's probably when you get the answer of like, all right, we're going to move on. And on the pre-approval thing is like, Eric, I agree with you. Like, what are we doing pre-approving packaging if it doesn't mean shit? Like, why are we devoting our time to it? Never mind putting operators through that nonsense of like, what's the point? Just a quick aside on the pre-approval piece though. One issue that did come up, and I thought it was just sort of a comical like figures, is make sure when you're reviewing the pre-approval for packaging that you have your monitor on your screen dialed into the right Pantone colors, because what might not look like neon on your screen is very neon in practice. So we ended up having people submit like color codes, and because I think we did approve a package that ended up being very neon, but it's because someone had to adjust their monitor more carefully, and it looked muted on the screen.
I'm assuming this isn't the first time. Like, obviously, the $5 million in lost revenue is an egregious example, but like this is like a frequent
advertising,
thing. Like,
yeah.
I'm not even going with the average. Just with inspectors not enforcing the law. Is management in the commission aware of this? Is stuff being done to change this? I mean, I would think that, that particular case, I would think could open the commission up to liability if that operator wanted to, right? Like,
yeah, maybe. Yeah, it wouldn't be my place to sort of maybe forecast that, or even like the merits of it. I don't know enough, but I guess I'll say yes to a degree. And I think part of it is the investigators in the field being both empowered, but then also accountable from like I used to describe it as you don't have a ticket book necessarily. Like everything ends up becoming like a grand jury investigation. You don't have the ability to go in and write speeding tickets for some reason. Like I think for me, that would be a far more efficient administrative process to say, I did an inspection. I'm leaving you with this speeding ticket. Like you can appeal it to somebody, whether it be a hearing officer or the commission. Like set an infrastructure in place like that. That's less, I saw you 2 weeks later, I get an NOD for something I didn't even see coming. Now what am I supposed to do with it? Like, do I fight it? Do I accept it? I've talked to a lot of operators since leaving the commission that I think are more willing to talk to me at this point about some of this stuff. And my reaction is generally like, I didn't know anything about it. I think that's really stupid. And I wish you would have pushed on it, like fought back a little bit on that, because I do think it's stupid. But there's this reticence to it because they're your regulator. Like that, I get that sort of that power dynamic because that's real, it's legitimate. And I don't know how to solve that outside of actually putting in place better mechanisms internally where, again, like something can be appealed efficiently without having to like halt production, halt operations, and also risk really pissing off your regulator and alienating yourself such that now you feel like every time I take a step sideways, I've got a target on my back and they're going to come for my license. My license is my livelihood. And so that dynamic, I think, needs to get repaired severely. I do think, and I hope that the commission's putting in effort to build better rapport and relationships with the industry. I know when I would go to things like those CBA roundtables, it was really disarming for me to hear from operators directly. But I think it was also, I hope it was the same in return to be like, oh my God, this guy's actually a human being. And he sat, listened for 2 hours, took notes, had comments. Those things I think were good for me to get out of my bubble a little bit. But yeah, I do think on things like investigators giving difference of opinions, when we learned of it, we realized we're not taking good enough notes and sharing it amongst our staff. As far as one investigator's in the field in Western Mass and says or does something, and this question didn't get brought up to enforcement counsel, who actually could offer an interpretation, or it didn't get brought up to Sean, who could offer an interpretation. We never checked the minutes from that meeting where the policy was actually put in place. So we're enforcing it differently because we read it differently. And so we realized we need to compare notes internally better. So we started to do things like investigator team meetings. And I would go and sit with the investigators for, I don't know how frequently, but every so often. Part of it was to get, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What do you need for resources? But then also like fire away. What do you got for questions? And I would say that happened probably, if I was there 5-ish years, probably closer to year 3, more so. And then more frequently. COVID obviously changed things because everything went virtual. I think that was a pretty bad impact on our ability to collaborate because it's hard to collaborate virtually. But yeah, I don't think there was ever I could say we were generally aware of it, but to the granularity where I know about specific ones, probably not. But this stuff would bubble up periodically to me for sure.
And I was going to say,
did
Carl,
you guys?
I'm so glad that you brought this up too. I like it's in every state and it's a challenge. And certainly I appreciate with all the states that I work with. In one of the Midwest states that I work with, we just did a compliance training. And what was the one takeaway that I would hoped it was consistency, not just because it makes headaches for the agency itself. You just brought in a real world example of how it impacts your licensees that are trying to run a business and make a livelihood as well. So it is a challenge. There are systems you can put in place. I think for the most part, regulators are tuned into this. I'm hoping where they're able to, they're certainly addressing it, but, Massachusetts, like every single agency, this is a topic that comes up and they can certainly be doing a better job about it.
Did you guys like, Sean? It was one of the, maybe it was a clip or one of the podcasts I was listening to. You were talking about, there's a difference between, knowing something and being able to prove it, right?
Yeah.
But like, how much do you guys like know of the fuckery that's going on? And like, because as operators, I mean, there are times it's like it's like nobody's saying the quiet part out loud, but like we all know, like we're all in a room, we all know, like none of this stuff that has come down recently was a surprise to any operator at all. Like how does that work with you guys as regulators? Like, does that affect how you look into things? Like,
Yeah, Eric, I'd love to see if you had a similar experience in Maine, but I that is a constant or sort of a regular comment of mine, is that I can know a lot of things, but can I prove it is usually the biggest challenge. And the proof I always point out too was like a legal standard, not so much like I'm not just interrogating someone, like getting a confession. Like I've got to, not only does the proof and the evidence have to withstand it, but so does the process. And so like the 30A administrative rules and taking is my evidence obtained reliably? Did the agency act in an arbitrary and capricious way? Were we targeting someone? And so all those things were sort of is there an administrative record that I can stand on to then bring something that had sort of a procedural step that would go further of, will I survive a hearing officer? Will I survive the Cannabis Control Commission ultimately? Will they agree with me and my recommendation? And then will it withstand judicial scrutiny? And knowing that ultimately what is on the line is some level of property, whether it be a license or money. And so I would say the rumor mill, I always felt like the teacher in the class or like the school principal that like, I know, like I was the last to know. And if I was the last to know, everybody else already knows. And I look kind of dumb at times where I'm like, I felt kind of lame. Like I would go to those CBA meetings. They'd be like, how do you not know that's going on? I'm like, well, you literally just told me. But now once you tell, or someone would call me like, did you know this is happening? I'm like, great. Who's doing it? Oh, I don't want to get anyone in trouble.
Yeah. That's what I was waiting for.
Like, well,
that's what I was waiting for. Yeah.
Like in this instance, like the snitches get stitches sort of thing, but like, you can't just tell me someone's doing something and then not like, I hate rumors. I hate like secrets, like, but I also, now I have to follow up. And the follow-up though is going to be, if you can point me to the needle in the haystack, that's much more efficient than just saying there's a needle in that haystack over there. I'm like, well, shit, now I gotta find a needle. And like, am I devoting, all right, everybody, like drop what you're doing. Let's go pull apart the haystack. Or again, if you could zero me in on it, and that became like, well, can I be anonymous? Can you protect me? Like, can you put me in witness protection? Like, no, we don't have the resources, but that came up a lot.
Yeah, I always appreciated when industry folks would tell us those things, give us the gossip, kind of tattle on others. But a lot of the times it was exactly what Sean was saying. We're going to tell you this is happening, but we're not going to tell you where or who. So you would kind of have to.
But why aren't you doing something about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So A, is it credible? B, where do we start? Do we go through there's a process that has to go through. But yeah, there was no shortage of gossip or tattling, and it just has to fit into the process of the agency. like how egregious is the complaint? Because there's a lot of, I'm sure it's the same in Massachusetts, but I doubt it was as clicky as the main programs were. Little factions, little groups, the cool kids table, a lot of finger pointing and that stuff. I always appreciated the intel, the insights. Some of it was actionable, and others there's just hot garbage you couldn't really do anything with. So
And this is where I think another
Thank
interesting
you.
part, the inroads would always be different too, because that's where, Eric, where we are a little bit different is I had 5 commissioners that were often out in the field a bit too. And so if they're out and they're talking with folks, they might pick up little tidbits or breadcrumbs of the rumor mill and then bring it to me or bring it to someone else on the team. And even through that, like if 2 or 3 commissioners bring it up, but they bring a different breadcrumb, now it's almost like that detective board where it's like you've got the strings and it's like one big conspiracy, but you're like, I know they're up to it. I know they're up to it. And you're sort of building this case, so to speak. But then you're also saying to like a commissioner, like at some point you're going to be a judge on this case. So do you want to be a witness or do you want to be a judge? You can't be both. And that was always, I appreciated that commissioners were out there listening, but that was a fine line too, because they ran the risk of becoming witness at some point. And when I say witness, it was mostly like, what did you know? Who told you? When did they tell you? And now I've got to build that into my record, knowing that at some point, if I try to pull someone's license on this, and there were cases that I was aware of and or sort of opined on that have only recently been resolved. And I've been gone almost 2 years. So in that sense, part of it is resources for sure. And it's not to be it's sort of an evergreen excuse, but when I say resources, it's like, how many investigators are there that are both detective and sort of beat cop, so to speak, where they're out there doing inspections, they're doing routine, unannounced, et cetera, but they're also building cases and they've only got so much time in a day. And um, I always had confidence it was public health and safety centric, and that was always at risk. Then that's your top priority. Like the rest of the stuff can wait, unfortunately.
just to end on like answering your question, Carl, like how much of this stuff that do we know? We know what we know from the front lines. We know what's told to us. We don't know outside of that. I'm sure there's a huge void in what we know. But at the end of the day, I think it's important. Like, did Sean, did the current cannabis do they want to do something about it? Yeah, of course they do. Like, they're in that role for a reason. They want to make sure, again, they're doing their best job as regulators and they're creating a competitive environment, especially for those folks that are doing it the right way. They're like your best allies in this whole thing. But there is a varying degree of like what a kind of action can be taken based off of the breadcrumbs that you get. Just to go back to Sean's analogy.
Nice segue, subtle. Well, Carl, if you're willing to stick around, we do trivia here. I don't know the score. I'm sure I'm winning. But the goal of the whole point of this is one of us or both of us are supposed to bring a trivia question. The other one tries to answer it. The point is that it should be somewhat educational, informative, maybe a little nuanced, but the goal is try to stump the other one, but make it somewhat topical. So I don't know, Eric, do you want to go first with a trivia question? And
Yeah, and I took a page out of your book, Sean. I tried to make the question relevant to our guest today, Carl, from an operator's perspective. A lot of the times where, anyway, let me ask the question. And
I'll
all
deem
right,
it
so
relevant or not.
I, what percentage of U.S. state legal cannabis operators were profitable in the last year, 2024? And I'm looking for a percentage. And I will
Jesus.
I'll give you a plus or minus of 5% in order to be deemed right. So let me repeat the question one more time. Carlin, if you want to jump in, you can either team up with Sean or you can give your own answer. And I will say the answer kind of surprised me, but what percentage of what percent of US state legal cannabis operators were profitable in 2024?
The number's going to be low. Like whatever you think it is, it's going to be lower. And like, what's profit? Like EBITDA?
EBIT? No, just I think you're overcomplicating the question, Sean.
Carl, do you have an answer?
I do. 27%.
Carl, did you know the
Oh,
answer?
Yes, I did.
Oh, damn it.
Oh, Jesus.
Doesn't that seem higher than you would think it?
I was ballpark 25, but I kept thinking it's going to be lower than that. It's going to be lower.
Yeah. When I read that, I was like, that can't be right.
It's
But
27%, really.
so this is also according to our
Then what's
friend.
everybody complaining
Bo went
about?
up.
Yeah. So we know Bo, and it came from his U.S. jobs report earlier this year, and I just thought it was an interesting statistic, and I thought it was relevant to the conversation today. But I will say, Sean, I'm kind of with you. Like I saw 27%, and I was like, wow, I see. If I was to guess, I would have guessed like 20 to 25, like 7. I mean, that's what I would consider significantly lower. So I'm not saying, 27% of people are profitable. What's everybody complaining about? We're like in a great spot. No, that's certainly not it. But still
I
interesting.
wonder if that
nonetheless.
also takes into account the uncertain tax positions of that nobody is paying 280E. And
Well, I guess
I
that's why
wonder
I'm
if
saying
that-
what is profitable, right? Like that's
Yeah. Well, maybe tune in for the next episode, and at the top of the show, I can bring in like clearly defined terms for us. But yeah, I don't have what the definition of profitable is. I'm just assuming $100 went out and 101 came in.
You're calling that profit. Okay. How much do they owe in debt to friends and family and convertible notes? And all right, so I have more of a lack of topical question, but I went way back. So last time I asked a question about reefer madness in the 1930s. I went even further back now. So cannabis has been used as medicine for millennia. As you can tell, this is a question off the internet. Which ancient civilization left behind one of the earliest written records of medical cannabis usage around 1550 BCE? It's multiple choice. So,
Okay, thank God.
yeah. I would have guessed the Ottoman Empire, but it's not one of the options. Greece, Egypt, India, or China. So A, Greece, B, Egypt, C, India, or D, China.
Like I don't know the answer, so this is like just straight up guessing game. I want to go Egypt, but
Okay.
I'm gonna go China here. I just feel like that's a better match. Carl, you got anything here?
I remember reading something about old Chinese weed, something in the news a few years ago. So I'll stick with you.
All right, well, it's Egypt. So
Damn it.
yeah, it's the Ebers papyrus, or Ebers, Ebers, and they prescribed cannabis for inflammation. So,
You can
which,
grow
if I'm
some
not
good-
mistaken, Eric, we had a question at one point that your answer was tummy troubles for what cannabis was prescribed for.
Wasn't I right? Didn't I get the question right?
I think it was a stretch, but I think your actual answer was tummy troubles. So
Tummy troubles.
yeah,
Apparently, you can grow good weed there on the Nile River, huh?
that's apparently. Any parting thoughts? Carl, this was actually better than I expected, despite the fact I took a beating. But I really enjoyed.
Was I harsh? I didn't. That wasn't.
No, I think
my
you
intent
were
at all.
you were
No.
objectively fair, and I think I wish we could have probably spent 4 hours on this conversation, which also means we probably should at some point and have you on again, because I have so many more questions for you and your experience, and I also know that our listeners would benefit from hearing from you about just frankly your experience, your life. I think that the conversion from Wall Street to cannabis and what that looked like, but also the ebb and flow of being an operator, the experience of exiting the business. I'd also love to hear more about what's next for you and what you're up to, and so I regret that I didn't take the effort to sort of steer us in that direction, but it's also just a reminder for me that we should absolutely do this again. I'll also just close from my standpoint and reiterate that I've always been grateful for your candor and your. I think you've always approached me, even when I was a regulator and since, with what feels like a mutual respect, and that it was never an adversarial relationship. It was never, you know, as regulators, I'm sure Eric, you can attest to this too. Sometimes we do feel like the bad guy. you never made me or anyone on my team feel that way. And I think that's a testament to how you conduct yourself, how you conduct your business. And another testament is the fact that the countless people that root for you and for Jesse and your team, just thank you for being an operator in Massachusetts. Thank you for your experience, and thank you for all the contributions you've made, but also that I'm sure you'll continue to make to our industry here in Mass, but I'm sure beyond as well. So it's been an absolute joy and privilege to get to know you, but I've learned a ton from you as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not good with compliments, so this may like I don't know what to do with my hands. So, but thank you. Yeah, this
But any closing thoughts, Eric or Carl? Anything you want to leave our listeners with?
No, I'll just say thanks for joining us, Carl. No, time is precious here. Appreciate you joining the podcast. And I'll echo Sean. Hope to have you back. I enjoyed this conversation.
I'm sure you did, asshole. See, the
Thank
colorful
you guys,
language.
and
We're back.
one thing that I think was helpful with me listening to your first 6-7 episodes was understanding, and this is
So you're
and
the one. You're the listener. Okay.
I am
Like and subscribe.
but I never thought, and I never had a conversation with any other operators that gave you guys the grace that you were building a startup too. And the first time, Sean, when you said you were building the fire, whatever the analogy
Yeah,
was, and it was
yeah.
like, I felt because you guys were supposed to be the grown-ups. You guys had all of the answers. Dad is the one that grounds us. Mom's the one that does the thing, right? Like that was you guys. You guys had it all figured out, and we were just trying to live in your world that at times didn't seem to make sense. And looking at it through the lens of, yeah, you guys are just fucking figuring it out too. That, I think that's important, and important for operators to realize. Now, should the commission now 5-6 years in have the same grace? We could leave that to but yeah, thank you guys.
No, that's a great point. It's a great place to end. And we should talk more about that, Eric, and maybe we have some other folks on that lived in our shoes. But speaking of that, Grace, thank you for all that you've shown us. And just thanks for sharing your insights and wisdom with us, our listeners. And for those of you that do listen to the hybrid, thank you for sticking with us. And we have more exciting guests coming up too, which we're really happy to be able to bring this to folks. We hope we're able to disarm some of the mystique around cannabis and cannabis policy and regulation. It is a daunting industry, and I think folks like Carl and others that live it get into it sometimes knowing the risks and sometimes knowing the challenges, but learn along the way. And our responsibility, I think, as regulators is to try to work with them and make that life as manageable as possible. But we also have to play our role, which is that balls and strikes, and we call it when we see it. But until next time, certainly as Eric alluded to, like, subscribe, tell your friends, and we will see you hopefully soon. So thanks for listening, and take care.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah. The hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid. Yeah. The hybrid.